I think I seriously wanted to write when I was around 12. At the end of primary 6, the teachers will give us a form and ask us what do we want to be when we grow up. And at that age, I learned the word pengarang.
She will forget all the bad things, forget whatever that is worrying her, and then she writes. When you write, you forget everything.
I remember one of my cousins told me that I was creepy, in a sense like every time when they're playing or every time when there was a bunch of adults, around there, I will always sit in a corner, pretend that I'm not there and listen and watch. I don't really like being with others because I don't enjoy what they're doing, what they're talking about. And my mom used to tell me that there was one time when she was worried because I usually sit in a corner, and she said, talk to myself. So I didn't realize at that time that it scared a lot of people. It scared my mother especially because she said I'll be locked up in my room and talking to myself. And I remember that time Mary Poppins was in the theater, but a lot of my classmates have seen it. They keep talking about Mary Poppins. They were so excited about Mary Poppins. But I couldn't see it because my parents couldn't afford to even buy one ticket, for me to go and see it. So what I did was I tried to imagine who Mary Poppins was, what she was like. All I remember was that she flew down on an umbrella. So I was telling this story to my baby cousin, about Mary Poppins. But it was a very different kind of Mary Poppins to what was in the movies. That way I can go back to school and tell my friends, oh, I know about Mary Poppins. Those are some of the things that I remember doing when I was a child. So I guess that, from my primary school times, I've really enjoyed telling stories, except that being a child, they were just mostly gibberish, I guess.
So my brother agreed to give her that name. So she's called Golda. And I know everyone says that it's a very unique name. Very unique name, a very good, very nice name for her. It suits her, golden child. And then my mom said she's going to be someone very popular in Sarawak. Maybe she is going to be the chief minister, when she grows up.
But all the while I was growing up, the thing about me was that I was a bit adventurous. In a sense, whenever I go to the longhouse or to my grandparents' orchard, I will be just going off on my own, walking off into the jungle alone and all that. It used to scare my grandparents. And so what my grandmother did was, the usual stuff, telling me stories about monsters that will eat me. And instead of frightening me, it made me more fascinated with the jungle. And suddenly I'm looking up every tree, trying to find a monster, looking behind every bush, trying to find a monster. So then my Iban grandmother realized that the ghosts and monster stories were having an opposite effect on me. So what she did was, she started making me read Iban storybooks. My grandfather had quite a few in his collection. So she would make me sit down and read Iban literature to her. I didn't come from a rich family, so my parents couldn't afford to buy books for me, and I had to rely a lot on the SMC public library. Before that, to tell you the truth, and I'm quite ashamed to say, I was always last in the class because I couldn't spell. I could only spell my own name. I couldn't be bothered to learn to read, write, or spell until I was about 9. And that was because an English teacher passed me one of Annie Blyton's book, The Faraway Tree. I think it was about 4 children who moved to a cottage, and behind the cottage there was a forest, and inside the forest there was a magical tree. And the reason I read it was because I wanted so much to find that tree. I was thinking like, maybe there's a clue inside the book, about where I can find that tree. Because at that age, you don't understand the difference between reality and fantasy yet. And so I was always fantasizing about looking for that tree. Oh, they even have some of my books here. Oh, how nice. That's very sweet. Well, it feels good. It feels good. It means like somebody have requested for these books to be here. So that means like somebody have actually read it and think that it's good enough to be put in the library here. So it feels amazing. Yeah, I would really love to see more local books actually. Because right now, I'm surrounded by foreign English fiction, It'd be great if there'll be more Sarawakian English fiction, around my fiction. I think that'll be wonderful.
And when I read her books, I realized that this is what she's doing. She's telling what we call a mystic structure. Each character in each book has a hero's journey. They're all outcasts. They've all been thrown out of society. Then they have to redeem themselves in some ways. And she's following an ancient tradition from Greek mythology. But is it based on facts? People say, how can it not be? But then again, who knows? And it has that borderline sense that, well, maybe it is, who's to say what's fact, what's not? So she breaks that sense of fantasy, but in such a way that it's plausible, and it's interesting, and as a reader, you're caught in the story.
But it did pose its own problem though. For example, even to this day, I find it very difficult to remember facts. I'll be like reading one paragraph and then my mind would just drift. So usually I can't really tell if what I remember is what I read from the book or a story that I came out on my own. My primary school history teacher used to complain that reading my essay was like reading a story. Why can't you just give me the facts? I can't, because that's not how my brain works. So it was a lot of problem when I was, trying to be scholastic.
She has a mind of her own. She always creates something for herself. I think she started writing then because she's always at home, and then whenever we go there, Golda is busy, always busy.
I think I seriously wanted to write when I was around 12. At the end of primary 6, the teachers will give us a form and ask us what do we want to be when we grow up. And at that age, I learned the word pengarang. So I wrote down the word pengarang inside there. And I remember my teachers were all trying to persuade me to become a secretary, a lawyer, because they really could not understand why I wanted to just write. I wanted to study English literature actually, after I left Form 5. But because my parents said that they couldn't afford, to fork out their own money to send me to study English literature, so I took up social studies for matriculation, and then accounting for my degree. So I had to rely a lot on scholarships in those days. It was only until I went to Japan in the 90s to study in Waseda University that I realized that there was so much modern Japanese stories. Before this, I always assumed that folklore is just something that's old, that's traditional, that's oral, and then that's it, you know. But when I went to Japan, I see all those mangas and animes, and then there are movies. And I was thinking, like, why can't we have something like this back in Sarawak? Because I grew up reading stories about Kling and Kumang and Segala Burong. And I know that these characters are as amazing as all those anime characters that I see in Japan.
So her books, which I like about them, is that she brings history of, she's making Iban myths, making it relevant today. So you take the past, here's a present right now, it still applies to the future too, because years from now people reading her books. They symbolize certain things to certain people, and they mean something. And that goes back many different generations. And she brings that to the forefront, making it relevant today.
But of course, after I came back, I started working, you know, and I tried to write on the side, but it's kind of difficult, you know, to be trying to write and not knowing how to write, and then trying to work at the same time. Because writing is a full-time job by itself. I mean, if you want to produce good quality stories, well thought out, well planned stories, you need to give your full attention to it. So then what happened was that around 2004, I decided to resign from my career. I resigned from my job in Kuching. And then I went full-time into writing. I didn't train to be a writer. So it took me a long while to figure out how to write, you know, in a proper way, in a way that will be accepted by a trade publisher. But of course, after 10 years of work life, after I graduate and then 10 years of work life, I suddenly decide it's now or never. So I might as well, you know, just plunge in, give it a try.
We all want to be a hero in some ways. That's why it makes her book so interesting, because it's a journey of a hero that anybody could be the hero if you believe in yourself. And so we identify with the characters. And that's a skill. That's hard to do that, to create a character from your own imagination that we as a reader identify with those characters and with what the struggle, because it's against the mythology of the whole thing. It's a hero's journey. It just happened to be in Iban culture.
Oral stories are usually told to a big crowd, and you have different ranges and age, and then it's interactive. I mean, that is the normal Iban storytelling style. It's interactive, because sometimes you may have very young children, sometimes you may have the elder folk that are sort of absent-minded, you know. But then when you're writing for readers, you cannot be repetitive, because readers pay attention. You know, they focus on every single word that you're writing down. So if you're repetitive, it becomes very tedious for them. And a lot of the local books that I find, written in the Iban language especially, are these kind of books. I'm very disappointed with that, because it's clearly obvious that these writers do not even bother to think about their readers.
You know, she must have asked a lot of people for comments, so that she really knows how to write all those mystery, all those fantasy. The main character reminds me of her, and she has a mind of her own, and she's a warrior.
The story had been with me for quite a while, actually. At first, I was scared to write it, about Bujang Mayas from the Iban Dream series. At first, I was a bit reluctant to write about it, because it had Keling in it, it had Kumang in it, it had Senggalang Burong in it. I didn't really want to write it for publishing, because I was feeling very reluctant. I did not understand how people would accept it, and I was, you know, raised in a semi-superstitious family. Like, what would happen if I start writing about these sacred characters, you know? But then one night, I had a very interesting dream. I dreamt of a giant python that came at me, and it was attacking a longhouse. And then when I jumped back, fell off the stage, and then I realized I was looking at a stage play. And the giant python became a wooden puppet. When I told the dream to my Iban friends, they said, no, that is confirmation that you can tell the story. And that was when I started to seriously write Iban Dream for publishing.
The shaman's voice made even the stoutest person tremble as she said, "There is no cure for this sickness. Evil has entered our sanctuary through this boy. He is the vessel. He must be sent away, and the evil spirit will go with him." The people shouted chaotically, "No, the boy shall bring nothing with him. He must leave that very night." They pushed both father and son toward the entrance, as the people continued to pelt them with firewood and bones.
At that time, the longhouse was suffering from malaria, but they thought that this boy, because of his behavior, had brought a curse on the longhouse. So the father sent him away, and he met an orangutan, and the orangutan raised him.
It was the nature of apes to avoid contact with human settlements and nomads. But on this 20th year, Minjat left the Tokanjak, the orangutan, and tried to approach a Penan group. On seeing him, they ran in terror. Rumor then spread among the tribes of a wild spirit living in the jungle, one of human form that acted and smelled like an ape.
The stories came out naturally. I mean, Bujang Mayas is in fact modeled on my father. My father used to love hunting. I kept thinking about this character who was jumping from tree to tree, going hunting, hunting animals and then hunting villains,
Her father is my eldest brother. He likes to hunt. He always go to the forest and hunt. He's a boxer. Can you imagine? The boxer, yes.
I think I finished the first draft around 2006. Sent it to a publisher, rejected, rewrote. Sent it to another publisher, rejected, rewrote. Luckily, I've made a promise to myself that I would never self-publish this book because I need to make sure that it is readable, to other people. So I've forgotten how many publishers I wrote to. But every time I get a rejection, I would redraft the book. I would look at it again, see what I can do, what I can improve. I would just redraft or maybe explain certain stuff in more detail or take away details. So yeah, that was a long learning experience for me. until towards the end, I wrote to somebody, the publisher in Singapore, and a few months later, I got the contract from him, and the following year, I got the book from him, and that was in 2012. In my case, the fastest I've ever finished a novel is in 2 years. So it can take you up to 4 years to write a novel, and along the way, you might forget some minor characters. So it's good if you have a note about all the characters in your book. I also have a map. My stories are based in Sarawak, so I use an actual map. I will have names of the places that is for my book. And then I will make a note on the geography of the area, what kind of plants grow there, what kind of food grows there. Because the landscape will determine your character's behavior. So if you know a lot about the landscape, then you'll be able to plot your character's actions better. I even track down, like, for example, like what sort of fruits grow during what month, so that I'll make sure that you don't get fruits from different seasons, you know, in the same scene. They'll be wrong. I prefer to go into these things with my eyes open. I mean, before I started writing seriously, I used to think that writing should be easy for me because my English was good. But I found out that that is far from the case. You know, I had to relearn a lot of things, you know, and express myself creatively.
Golda, in her writing, she will forget everything. She will forget all the bad things, forget whatever that is worrying her, and then she writes. When you write, you forget everything. She tries to forget all the worries, so there is no worry.
And so it's like, and that transcends all cultures. We all feel that way. We trust our instincts. And as a reader, we trust the writer's instincts, that she's not leading us astray. She's not bullshitting us, so to speak. She's telling a story that, yes, it's fantasy, yes, she's making up, yes, I don't really know if it's true or not, but in the context, I believe in it. And that's a skill as a writer. So I feel proud that I know her, met her before she finished her book, and in fact, she stuck with the process. She struggled through the process of writing. Can I do it? Can I pull it up? Can I sell it? Can I find a publisher? And most people give up. And that's even the hero's journey as a writer too. Being the hero of your own story in some ways.
Among us Ibans, we know a lot of our own stories. The problem is that for somebody who does not speak Iban, you don't see our stories because most of our stories have existed in the Iban language itself. So when I wrote Iban Dream, part of it was because of pride. You know, I was so proud of my own culture. You know, I was like thinking like, why can't my own culture be treated, given the same treatment as all those other stories, like the stories of the Greek gods or the stories of the Viking gods? Why can't Iban sacred characters reach that level, you know? In that sense, storytelling is very important because it is something that people can carry with them. No matter how they dress, no matter where they study, no matter what they eat, no matter where they live. Because you carry the culture with you, you carry the stories with you. And that's why I believe that storytelling is very important. It's not just something that maintains the identity of your culture, it also teaches your descendants their roots. And if you don't show your roots to your descendants, you know, where would they find their identity? They'll find it somewhere else. Right? Iban Dream was the first book that I wrote, and there is one scene here that I came up with because my father used to love hunting in the past. This is when Bujang Mayas killed a wild boar. Bujang Mayas returned to the great Nkabang tree that faced the pool and climbed down to its second lowest branch, which he hoped was high enough away from the ground to elude the boar's sensitive sense of smell. He twisted the long flaps of his new loincloth and pushed both ends into the wet